Hello and welcome to the continuation, or to another edition of the Agenda 2063 series on the African Continental Free Trade Area, where we are focusing on helping listeners and followers understand how the whole issue of African Continental Free Trade Area, what it's about, its dynamics, and how you as an ordinary individual can take advantage of it. So we are very happy to be here once again. The format is the same as last time, but today's edition is a continuation of last week, where we're looking at the Secretariat, the AfCFTA Secretariat and its benefits. Today we're going to look at the role of the private sector and civil society sector. The good thing about this whole Continental Free Trade Area is that civil society and private sector were brought on board quite early, so we will be speaking to our guests who were here last week to help us understand how these two sectors are able to help everyone, help explain the whole issue of the Continental Free Trade Area. So we'll take a break and we'll get to APR March and we'll be right back.
Are you an institution or individual? Do you intend to organize a memorable event to be archived for future reference? Then look no further than AAU Studios, because it's your best bet with our spacious studio and state-of-the-art media equipment such as 4K Panasonic video cameras, KinoFlow lights, assorted microphones, live streaming equipment, among others. You are sure to get the best of productions. Visit us at Trinity Avenue, East Legon, adjacent the National Accreditation Board, or contact the AAU Studios via the following email addresses: info@aau.org, AAUTV@aau.org, or ransford@aau.org. Alternatively, you can call us on +233 244 736280.
So, welcome to APRM Watch, Africa Peer Review Mechanism Watch. In this segment, we try to help followers and viewers understand a bit about this Africa Peer Review Mechanism, which last week we learned that it has been around since 2003. So, it's in its 17th year and it's doing very big and great things. There are a number of meetings that are happening around the African Peer Review. As we speak there in Addis Ababa, they're having a forum trying to look at some of the activities that are happening in the coming year. But one of the biggest outcomes of the APRM this week has been discussion with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt and the UN Office for South-South Cooperation in helping to implement what they call BAPA, which is the Buenos Aires Plan of Action plus 40, which is an outcome document to promote South-South cooperation. Now, the whole idea around BAPA 40 is to encourage sharing of knowledge and technical cooperation among South-South member states, so developing countries. That include continent of Africa and also Brazil and the larger global South countries. One of the things that came out from the BAPA and was pointed out was that the governance issues associated with mega projects of Agenda 2063, such as the Continental Free Trade Area, should actually be tackled by the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, because they feel that the expanded and core mandates now allow them to look a bit more closely at governance issues. And so some of the key recommendations include encouraging Africa Peer Review Mechanism's involvement in South-South cooperation initiatives aligned with its core and expanded mandates, and also governance aspects of AfCFTA. So to that end, one of the things that they want to do is to set up a working group that includes the African Union Commission, NEPAD, and African Union Development Agency, Africa Peer Review Mechanism themselves, and then the Africa Union Commission Chairperson Bureau. These will form part of the committee and they will help to implement the BAPA, which is the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, promoted South-South cooperation. And relevant to this whole project is the fact that Africa Peer Review Mechanism, which up until now we did not really know was looking at the Continental Free Trade Area, has now actually stated explicitly that it will look at the governance area issues of the Continental Free Trade Area. Therefore, this presents exciting times for how the whole AU family is going to start bringing into the fold a lot of the Continental Free Trade Area, the area, aspects, and so on and so forth. So we'll definitely be updating you more on these things as and when practicable, so that we all also get up to speed on what the APRM is doing. So that ends the APRM Watch. We're going to take a break in a minute, and we'll return to the studio to speak with our guests.
كمال محمد عبيد مدير جامعة أفريقيا العالمية، أعمل في هذه الجامعة منذ العام 1982. جامعة أفريقيا العالمية كغيرها من الجامعات تؤدي وظائفها الرئيسية التعليم والبحث العلمي وخدمة المجتمع. الجامعة الآن دخلت في مشروع جديد بإدخال فكرة الجامعة المنتجة، وتقوم بتدريب الطلاب وتقوم كذلك بخدمة المجتمع. الجامعة الآن بالإضافة إلى كلياتها في مقرها الرئيسي تنتسب لها أكثر من 17 كلية نظامية في عدد من الدول الأفريقية وخارج أفريقيا. يشكل المركز الإسلامي الأفريقي واحد من المؤسسات الرئيسية في الجامعة، وهو الذي يهتم بتقديم الخدمة للمجتمع عن طريق تنظيم القوافل والمخيمات التربوية للطلاب. لدينا قناتين الآن، قناة العالمية العامة وقناة العالمية التعليمية، بالإضافة إلى راديو أفريقيا، ويديرها الأساتذة والطلاب. أن تحصل جامعة أفريقيا العالمية على جائزة الملك فيصل في مجال خدمة الإسلام هذا مؤشر لأن الجامعة تعمل في الاتجاه الصحيح، التعليم المتميز لتحقيق أهداف الدعوة.
Welcome back to the studio, and welcome back to Agenda 2063 series, looking at the Continental Free Trade Area. Today I have in the studio once again Mr. Louis Afo, Executive Director of the African Continental Free Trade Area Policy Network, Ghana and Diaspora. I also have Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Bansah, who is a director with the Policy Network, but also a staffer at Wisconsin University. Thank you very much for making time out of your busy schedules to speak with us. We're not going to recap last week as such, but this theme today is really looking at the role of the private sector and civil society sector. I'm sure you know that most AU programs have always had this bad tag associated with them, that they don't consult civil society, they don't consult private sector, and so on. But one of the things that has made AfCFTA an apparent success so far is the fact that both these sectors have been brought on board early. So the question is, if they are brought on board early, what are the benefits that ordinary people can get from this, from the fact that they have come out early? And is the engagement up to speed? Are we satisfied? So let's start off with you, Mr. Louis Afo, to help us understand the role of civil society and private sector first in this whole Continental Free Trade Area.
Thank you very much for having us. Okay. And thank you also to your viewers. Basically, the contribution of CSOs and private sector is enormous. You can never even outline them all. But basically, in any jurisdiction, being in an economy or being it with the AU, before the public sector, there was a private sector. Before there was a public sector, there was a private. Before the private sector is intertwined with the CSOs, civil society organizations. What do they do? And these are social innovation agencies. And society is full of social interventions. And so if you want to really formulate a policy to help the well-being of the people, every policy should be to the utmost benefit of the people. And so if you want to formulate a policy and you decide to ignore or shun or not give attention to the policymakers who have in-depth on the ground live issues, at the end of the day, to come back to them. And so this is where CSOs and private sector come in. If we take the economy, we always say the private sector is the engine of why? Because at the end of the day, the forces of demand and supply will have to come together to determine the price. Yeah. At the end of the day, governments cannot continue to have control the economy. You have to let the economy thrive by such factors and determine, at the end of the day, there will be more people, some capital here, expansion here. And so the same thing applies when it comes to policies. These social CSOs and private have a lot of vast programs that cut across every fiber of society, that goes to the treasures of the society. So at the end of the day, they are able to come out with policies that will be to the benefit of everybody. So it is good that you really consult if you are a policy maker. And so to the AU, these two private sector institutions has a role to play because at the end of the day, their voice, their inputs will let the policy be sustainable.
But the only concern though isn't the fact that the private sector is usually associated with the corporate sector, let's say. And don't they often get a lot of accusations that they're always thinking about the bottom line? It's always only about business. Whereas when you look at the civil society aspect, they are more people-centered. So how do you reconcile, a trade agreement like this, ensuring that it is not just only about the bottom line, and that they're also thinking about creating opportunities for the ordinary people? It's not just about scaling their businesses up.
We have even moved away from a purely private sector society. Yeah. We have private sector participation. And before, as I said, before there was a public sector, there was a private sector. The private sector, how we look at the previous definition of what a private sector is. Basically, the CSOs, they are funded, they come to the private sector for funding. So if the argument is about the fact that private sector is focused on profiteering, it's the same profit that sometimes is used as the donations and funding sources for the CSOs. Yeah. And so the only thing is that the private sector has been encouraged to rather look at the environment. Sometimes they really don't take seriousness to the environmental issues because of the profiting and what have you. But we are looking at the private sector in the perspective whereby it could be corporate, it could be individual. But at the end of the day, the private sector and CSOs are not public. They are public. We are using public because we realize the public is like more or less a phase out, phase in kind of system. The private sector owns resources and they're able to distribute resources to their advantage and to the wider society. If you look at a public sector, most of the time, if you are tied into governments, it is based upon the program of a particular system of government that will decide whether the masses are going to enjoy or the few people are going to enjoy. And so you cannot rule out the importance of, if you weigh the advantages of of private sector CSOs against their non-involvement, you realize that it's better you keep them in. Because finally, at the end of the day, governments everywhere, even capitalism, cannot have a pure capitalism. Yeah. There is always going to be that. And if you, isn't Aristotle? Aristotle, or one of them said the individual, a family, and then society. Yeah. So an individual moves to family, then society. Then the society becomes the nation. And so within the society, you create various sectors within the society that can thrive. That is where I keep saying that you cannot rule out the private sector and the CSOs to any policy making.
Reverend Dr. Bansah, in your view, how do we help sell the case of the private sector and civil society to ordinary people, especially around the Continental Free Trade Area?
Thank you very much, and once again, thank you so much for doing a great job for Mother Africa. You realize that the civil service or sector plays a key role. That is being a voice for the voiceless. And what is the whole idea of development? Development is to ensure that the welfare of the people becomes the ultimate decision of every nation. So what AfCFTA is trying to do is to make sure that the continent of Africa is developed to the fullest optimum agenda. And for that matter, making the living standard of the people better. by reducing the cost of living. So I think that if really that has been our agenda, then we really need to empower the private sector.
Okay.
So empowering the private sector have many factors. It's not just having a seminar and shouting, but also working on modalities, the funding, business developments, business innovations, be able to have a joint venture, and to a very large extent be able to groom companies that are pro-poor in nature, companies that are infant in nature, companies that are marginal in nature, to develop to a level that is basically accepted by all standards.
Okay.
And equally be able to compete globally. Now we're talking about coming to the lifeline of a foreign direct investment. And so they'll be able to compete globally. And I think that is what the network is doing. And so far, I'm so happy about the input that the executive director has been making. And you realize that most of the universities, even in Ghana, are now buying into the ideas that despite they are training their students, after also have a role to play. So it's all about the mindset. It's all about the orientation. So we're talking about social orientation, but the best orientation is education.
Yeah.
So we needed to take the education seriously, especially those who are future leaders, that this is the way for us to go. We can't continue doing what our forefathers were doing and expect a different results. And so AfCFTA has really come, and I see it as a game changer. And I think the few people that have bought into the idea already are making a lot of inroads. And if really we can maintain that kind of discipline, it's really going to affect the whole continent. And in the next 10 years, if not, then we should be in the position of leading the whole world.
Wow. And if I may put this all-important question to you, how would you describe your the policy network? Would you say it's a civil society sector, it's part of civil society, or it's private sector, or is it a bit of a hybrid?
Well, I think that you've hit the nail on the head. That's a bit of hybrid.
Yeah.
I always urge society to be always dynamic. So if you look after policy network, it's dynamic because we have decided to, it's an international NGO, a CSO, but the private sector and public sector point of view is that we have decided to use a kind of system whereby we want everybody to be part. And so we use apps, technology apps, to have virtual offices and virtual staffs and virtual employees. So that has become part of it. That is the social part and the social app technology part of it. That has broadened to, if you call it in geographical terms, the branches of the network. And then the volume of staff. For example, if right now Facebook is to say that everybody who is a member or who has applied to their network is a staff, then you can imagine the number of staff that Facebook has. So we are a hybrid because on one side we're looking at social interventions, on one side we're looking at public because you have, as I said, public sector people participating as virtual staff. And then on one side private because we engage in certain activities that we are foreseeing that the benefit should be to everybody that's around us and to society.
Okay. And Reverend Emmanuel Bansah, do you think that you are getting enough support as a network from, let's say, government agencies or government? Because one of the things that the private sector often laments is how government has not created enough of an enabling environment. Do you think there's enough of an enabling environment at the moment to allow for AfCFTA to develop as per what you see with the network?
The whole thing is that if you are not serious, no government will take you serious. So in the past, I think it's all about talk show, not about the network per se. But then government has seen more action today than the previous years. And that is why there has been a very strong collaborations in Ghana between the network and the state. And the state has really given its full support. We were even surprised that the president himself has vowed not to interfere or let any politicians interfere in the affairs of the network, and for that matter, the free trade continental area, simply because it must not be seen as another political party in Africa, but rather a development agent. And that is what is really going to transform the continent for us. So we have had enough support in terms of ideas, in terms of logistics, in terms of social support. It has been there. And as we have indicated, we just started not too long. So we are believing that as we continue educating society, much more people will now come on board, and I think that we'll be able to do far better than what we are doing now.
Small and medium-sized enterprises, let's work a little around that. In your view, are they well equipped to prepare themselves for the continental free trade area? Once again, a lot of the time, one of their major complaints is that they don't have enough capacity. And that is even before the whole AfCFTA came about.
Exactly.
So now, in your view, what do you think needs to be done for SMEs as part of them being the value chain of the private sector to help prepare them well?
I think the issue about the SMEs has continued to be one of the pivotal agenda of the network, in the sense that it's fall under the blue economy, where the network is championing to the extent that the free trade area will not just concentrate on buying and selling, but also to develop the business capacity of infant businesses to be able to match with international standards.
I'm going to interrupt you there. We're going to take a break, then we'll be right back.
Are you an institution or individual? Do you intend to organize a memorable event to be archived for future reference? Then look no further than AAU Studios, because it's your best bet. With our spacious studio and state-of-the-art media equipment such as 4K Panasonic video cameras, KinoFlow lights, assorted microphones, live streaming equipment, among others, you are sure to get the best of productions. Visit us at Trinity Avenue, East Legon, adjacent the National Accreditation Board, or contact the AAU Studios via the following email addresses: info@aau.org, AAUTV@aau.org, or ransford@aau.org. Alternatively, you can call us on +233 244 736280.
Welcome back from the break. I have in the studio Mr. Louis Afo, Executive Director of Africa Continental Free Trade Area Policy Network, Ghana and Diaspora, and Director of AfCFTA Policy Network, Reverend Emmanuel Bansah as well. Thank you. You were talking about the infant industries and SMEs. We were talking just a few minutes ago about the private sector and equipping SMEs. We'd like to hear you elaborate on that.
Yeah, so you realize that what the SMEs lacks most at times has to do with technical knowledge and technical know-how. And I think that is what the network is putting in place, so that we really orient them, educate them, and restructure businesses that really have future but have a difficult beginning. So we will not just allow businesses just to compete globally, because they may not have what it takes to compete globally. So what we needed to do is to support them, equip them, and bring them to that level whereby they will begin to compete. So the free trade area is not only to champion buying and selling, but also to develop businesses. It's all about supporting moving industrialization drive, develop the continent industrially, That is what we are trying to do. Because what are we going to sell? What are we going to buy if we are not producing the things ourselves? So at the end of the day, the concept is focusing majorly on productivity and industrialization. We want to produce and we want to industrialize. We want to go into manufacturing. We want to go into petrochemical industry. We want to develop local technologies. If our tractors and equipment that we use for our agro businesses can be produced over here, it's really going to help us. Pharmaceutical industry is there. So we will look at all these key areas and redevelop them. And I can tell you that with the kind of policies and programs that the Secretariat that is about to take off have in place, if really we have been able to discipline ourselves, then in the next 10 to 15 years, Africa will be leading the world.
Inshallah, as someone may say. Mr. Afo, I want to get back to you with this also all-important question around the private sector. So the private sector, some feel that the private sector complains too much. Because first of all, unlike the ordinary individual who cannot always be moving freely across the continent, the private sector, once there's some level of enabling environment, they're able to move. And when you even look at the whole concept of regional integration, buried inside that concept is the freedom of good, capital, people, services. So already the private sector is factored in the whole conversation on integration, and by extension after as well. So why is it that we're having trouble with the whole freedom of movement protocol? If you can elaborate that for us a little bit, because the freedom of movement protocol, yeah, the freedom of movement, because unlike the momentum that has moved very quickly on signing and ratification of AfCFTA, freedom of movement protocol is at a snail's pace. About 10 or 11 countries have only signed, yet we have 55. How come?
We're hoping
that's
that
not happening.
Those countries who have not signed
Exactly.
will sign. Because immigration is a sensitive issue.
Okay.
And members are not going to say that because we've started trading among ourselves, we have to allow everybody to come to our country. So they have to adjust their immigration laws. I think that's what most people want to do. Again, there are some too who would like to have citizenship conferred on them.
Okay.
And those ones have to go through a process.
Yeah.
So I think these are the two major hindrances to why you wouldn't have most countries signing to that agreement, free trade agreement. Now, if you come to the other question that you asked with respect to the private sector complaining, the point is, basically, sometimes they compete with government for resources. And so that is why they cry a lot. Because at the end of the day, the government is supposed to make the layout, the frameworks for the private sector to thrive, and including resource for equitable distribution. But at the end of the day, if there's supposed to be equitable distribution, you are the power player, you are the source, and you are contending with me for portions of space. It's difficult for the private sector to thrive, and that is one area that most Africans are really struggling. So for me, one other thing is that Doc was talking about the SMEs. One important thing is that when you call for trade liberalization, you are calling for competition.
Okay.
So you have to now be prepared to support your local industries to stand competition. You mentioned one issue about capital movement, and what have you. One important thing I always keep stressing is that if you take this, I was mentioning, what do you call it, David Ricardo's law of comparative advantage. That was when? That was about many years ago. And David was, at that time, resources were immobile. So he was looking at if we have one factor fixed or something.
Exactly.
So look at that time. That theory it has gone through reformation. Today, resources are what? Mobile. Through globalization. And so if you are a startup company and then you need something to augment your work and you need an app, excuse me, For instance, if you are doing a business and you need these days, you can even go to the business Play Store, pick that up. That is capital. Because you need some addition to what you are doing to go. So it is important for the private sector to position itself in a globalized economy now. It's the private sector to also take advantage of after says free movement of people. Then if you don't move the people, you can move the goods. If you don't move the goods, you can export your goods. What is happening in Nigeria right now, border, sorry to bring it in, is that Nigeria said, I've opened the border, but I'm not allowing any kind of good into my country. Yet, there can be certain products, in terms of tech products, that might not necessarily crawl through the border. That can be exported anyway. So we, the private sector, have to position itself in a globalized and a new world order to be able to benefit from African continental free trade.
So if we're no longer talking about comparative advantage, as you say, it's outmoded. Is it, to return to what we talked about last week, is it value addition that we are now talking about?
Yes, I wouldn't say it's totally outmoded. I would say that David Ricardo's focus at that time, he was not foreseeing that you come to globalization. Globalization makes borderless
resources.
Resources become borderless, and it's mobile. But he was looking at fixed factors as resources in those times. And today we have a lot of resources that are not fixed. They are mobile. And I was giving an example that even apps, technology apps are resources, but they are mobile. They are mobile, you can be used anywhere. So that is what I was just drawing attention. So the private sector should not complain. The private sector should position itself in a globalized world. The finance. AfCFTA is not. It's not different from other free trade agreements. The only thing that makes our agreement different is that we are 54 countries making the biggest after the World Trade Organization. And also the difference is that Africans have a unique product that they will trade among themselves.
Okay, so thank you once again. So Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Bansah, perhaps if you could kindly explain to help us understand a bit about the private sector and how you would explain it to your students in your globalization lecture.
Okay, thank you very much. As we have been establishing for a very long time, the private sector, she said, is the engine of growth. And if really a country wants to develop, a continent wants to develop, then it really needs to empower the private sector, which is your business map as far as policies is concerned. Because if you don't develop the entrepreneurial skills of your people, government cannot provide all jobs. The reason why we have high level of unemployment across Africa is that governments thought that they can do it. But governments cannot do that. And once that they get to political office, you are going to operate a political economy, and which will not be a benefit unto your citizens in the long run. So what we need to do is to be able to empower entrepreneurs, businessmen and women who have the model, who have started something, empower them, give them the needed attention and care and the services and the resources needed, and they will really be able to transform the economy, expand their businesses and employ more people. Once more people have been employed, you realize that you solve the issue about unemployment. And even the rural migration, urbanization that continue to be a very big a problem to us will equally be solved. And once that is solved, you realize that the pressure on the resources in the cities will also reduce, thereby also crime rates and social vices equally reduce, because once there are jobs for the youths, they are likely to engage in activities that are against the laws of the land. So what we're trying to do now is that it's an emerging issue, and I think that we need to bridge a gap between the academia and the industry. We should now be able to develop a very good course in the universities whereby it's all about African trade and how best we can use it to propel growth and development. And I think it has been in the pipeline, and we're really working on it. By the end of this year, I think some of those programs should be out in most of the universities. And for us to take it from that angle is really going to be of a great help to us.
Some may say that this program in itself is also one of the things that can be, used for universities to help them understand what we are trying to do.
Exactly.
Yes, so without a doubt, the whole idea of education is so critical. And I think even the private sector needs to be empowered with education on all that is happening around.
Exactly. And we're equally talking about supporting education, not just grammar education, but technical and vocational education. And I think that I'm even proposing that we should be able to change the whole model from technical and vocational education to an industrial education. So we should begin having industrial colleges whereby we begin training people as to how to industrialize, as to how to produce, how to go into industry, go into commerce. And I think that will really help us. If we have been able to move through that angle, then I don't think that any of the African citizens will be traveling for white-collar jobs elsewhere or looking for greener pastures. I think that then we'll be able to create the enabling environment for businesses and investments to equally grow. And once we do that, we will attract foreign direct investments. And investors in general will be interested in the economy. Even that idea of hosting the African Free Trade Continental Area in Ghana alone that has really increased investor confidence. And when you look at the statistics now, there are a number of investors that have already come to the country. They are numerous, and I think it's really going to help us if we will maintain the discipline, we will maintain the focus, and not to deviate. I think it's really going to help the continent.
All right. We have a couple of minutes left before we wind down the show. So I'm going to now get to the stage where you're going to tell the audience what your take-home messages are. I think by now they've established what the private sector is, what the civil society sector is, the fact that you also CSO network, hybrid CSO, private sector, and so on. But what is it that you will like to leave for them, for viewers, that they can feel comfortable in their hearts that AfCFTA is here, and that now they have an opportunity to scale up whatever private business that they have, whatever opportunities that there are? What will be your take-home messages?
The Secretariat is here.
Right.
AfCFTA Policy Network is acting as a research capacity building thing.
Okay.
And we're offering our professional services, whether in Ghana or outside Ghana, to see to it that companies that are involved in exports, companies that are involved in certain construction, who are involved, who need information as to what is happening elsewhere in Africa. We are willing to offer that support and services.
Okay.
So that is one. And finally, I want institutions, academia, to take up this African Continental Free Trade Policy agreement as a kind of curriculum that they'll be running.
Right.
And so they can team it up with our office to be able to run a joint curriculum program. And then to the corporate bodies, we also say that we are willing to dispatch our research teams to assist in orienting their staff. Most of them don't have an iota of idea of what this whole thing is about. Yet, they wake up one morning and realize that they're in a competition in their world.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Bansah, what about you? What's your
Yes. Actually, we're trying to diffuse the mindset of aid, and we're trying to promote productivity and industrialization. So we don't want to be going cap in hand begging again as a continent. But so we want to be self-sufficient, and we have enough of the political independence. We want an economic independence for the African continent. So the African Continental Free Trade Area has come to stay. So we are telling our brothers and sisters who have the entrepreneurial mindsets, who have businesses that our doors are open. They should get closer to us, or they should open their doors for us to come in. Then we equally offer them special services, which will really help them for their businesses to grow and be able to compete globally. We'll help them with resources, with knowledge, with informations as to how best they can reorganize themselves and be able to come to the global standard and equally be able to compete globally. So the main issue has to do with developing our own businesses and for them to be able to produce to satisfy human wants.
Standards. I really like that, and that's another point that we'll have to come back to in a future program. But for the time being, thank you so very much for taking time always out of your very busy schedules to come and educate viewers and listeners about the whole Continental Free Trade Area. It's a very laudable program of Agenda 2063. It's a mega project of Agenda 2063, as they say. And we're very happy to be associated with the Association of African Universities to help tell this whole story of AfCFTA. We have created history. The future is us, you and me. So thank you very much once again. And next week, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation where we're looking at how East Africa, for example, some of the countries are preparing for the Continental Free Trade Area. The Secretary General will, hopefully by next week, will know the nationality of the Secretary General of the Continental Free Trade Area. And that will always be very important to determine how the whole dynamic of the political direction will go, as far as understanding how the Secretariat works. It's always interesting to be looking at that as well. So thank you very much once again, and we hope to speak to you next time. Please remember to drop your comments. That is rolling down on the screen on YouTube, Facebook, Association of African Universities, and on Twitter as well.